morning.
Good morning.
Let's go ahead and open up the sermon in prayer. Dear Lord, as we preach today, pray it is your words and not mine that are spoken, and that whatever message you have to hear for us today, let it sink into our hearts. In your holy name, amen. So I'm a church history nerd. I think that's no surprise. And one of my favorite stories is actually about John Wesley, when he was first coming to the colonies. During this time, he was a Church of England priest going through a major spiritual crisis. He had no idea really where to turn. So this was the mid-1700s, so people traveled by ship to get to the colonies. Suddenly there was a huge storm rocking back and forth, and he was trying to comfort his own people. But in the corner of the ship, he saw a group of German Christians called Moravians. They were singing hymns the entire time. When a huge wave hit the ship and actually broke the upper deck, everyone on the ship screamed, except for the Moravians. They continued singing on. And those songs in the calm presence of the Moravians helped to center the English passengers on the ship too. That impact helped shape John Wesley's belief for the rest of his life. So we're doing a sermon series on the book of Acts. We were reading about the kingdom of God in a time when things didn't make sense. When oppression was high, when people were cruel to each other, when it was easy and understandable to feel fear. What does it mean to have courage during times like this? To catch up a bit, Paul has been released from prison for proving his own innocence. He was there for 2 years. So no matter how many times the religious leaders wanted to keep him in prison or execute him, the outside world could find no fault with them. So now he is taking the ship to what is now known as Italy to continue proclaiming the kingdom of God. So let's go ahead and turn to Acts 27. I'll be reading from the Common English Bible. When it was determined that we were to set sail to Italy, Paul and some other prisoners were placed into the custody of a centurion named Julius of the imperial company. So he boarded a ship from Adramyttium that was about to set sail for ports along the coast of the province of Asia. So he put out to sea. Aristarchus, a Macedonian from Thessalonica, came with us. The next day we landed in Sidon, and Julius treated Paul kindly and permitted him to go to some friends so they could take care of him. And from there we sailed off. We passed Cyprus, using the island to shelter us from the headwinds. And we sailed across the open sea off the coast of Sicilia and Pamphylia, and landed in Myra and Mysia. And there the centurion found an Alexandrian ship headed for Italy and put us on board. After many days of slow and difficult sailing, we arrived off the coast of Cnidus, and the wind wouldn't allow us to go farther. So we sailed under the shelter of Crete under Salmon. And so we sailed along the coast with difficulty until we came to a place called Good Harbors, near the city of Lasea. Much time had been lost, and the voyage was now dangerous since the day of reconciliation had already passed. And Paul warned them, "Men, I see your voyage will suffer damage and great loss, not only for the cargo and ship, but also for our lives." But the centurion was persuaded by the ship's pilot's captain and by Paul's advice. And since the harbor was suited for spending the winter, the majority supported a plan to put out to sea from there. They thought they might reach Phoenix and Crete and spent their winter in its harbor, which faced southwest and northwest. And when a gentle wind south began to blow, they thought they could carry out their plan. They pulled up anchor and sailed closely along the coast of Crete. And before long, a hurricane-strength wind known as a northeaster swept down from Crete. And the ship was caught up in a storm and couldn't be turned into the wind. So we gave in to it, and it carried us along. And after sailing under the shelter of an island called Cauda, We were able to control the lifeboat only with difficulty. And they brought the lifeboat aboard and then began to wrap the ship with cables to hold it together. And fearing they might run aground on the sandbars of the Gulf of Citrus, they lowered the anchor and let the ship be carried along. We were so battered by the violent storm that the next day the men began throwing cargo overboard. And on the third day, they picked up the ship's gear and hurled it into the sea. When neither the sun nor the moon appeared for many days, and the raging storm continued to pound us, all hope of our being saved from this peril faded. So for a long time, no man had eaten. Paul stood up among them and said, "Men, you should have complied with my instructions not to sail from Crete. Then we would have avoided this damage and loss. Now I urge you to be encouraged. Not one of your lives will be lost, though we will lose the ship." Last night, an angel from the God to whom I belong and whom I worship stood beside me. The angel said, "Don't be afraid, Paul. You must stand before Caesar. Indeed, God has graciously given you everyone sailing with you. Be encouraged, then. I have faith in God that it will be exactly as he told me. However, we must run aground on some island." So on the 14th night, we were being carried across the Adriatic Sea. And around midnight, the sailors began to suspect that the land was near. They dropped a weighted line to take soundings and found the water to be about 120 feet deep. And after proceeding a little further, we took soundings again and found the water to be about 90 feet deep. After that, we might run aground somewhere on the rocks. And they hurled out 4 anchors from the stern and began to pray for daylight. The sailors tried to abandon the ship by lowering the lifeboat into the sea, pretending they were going to lower anchors from the bow. And Paul said to the centurion and his soldiers, "Unless they stay in the ship, you can't be saved from peril." The soldiers then cut the ropes to the lifeboat and let it drift away. And just before daylight, Paul urged everyone to eat. He said, "This is the 14th day you've lived in suspense, and you've not had a bite to eat. I urge you to take some food. Your health depends on it. None of you will lose a single hair from his head." And after he said these things, he took bread, gave thanks to God in front of them all, and then broke it and began to eat. Everyone was encouraged and took some food. In all, there were 276 of us on the ship. And when they had eaten as much as they wanted, they lightened the ship by throwing the grain into the sea. In the morning light, they saw a bay with a sandy beach. They didn't know what land it was, but they thought they might possibly be able to run the ship aground. So they cut the anchors loose and left them in the sea. At the same time, they untied the ropes that ran back to the rudders. They raised the foresail to catch the wind and made for the beach. But they struck a sandbar and the ship ran aground. The bow was stuck and wouldn't move, and the stern was broken into pieces by the force of the waves. The soldiers decided to kill the prisoners to keep them from swimming to shore and escaping. However, the centurion wanted to save Paul, so he stopped them from carrying out their plan. He ordered those who could swim to jump overboard first and head to land. He ordered the rest to grab planks of debris from the ship. And this way, everyone reached the land safely. If you're ever self-conscious about how you pronounce Bible words, remember this sermon. It's a miracle I got through Greek. All right. So, in 1793, there was a big outbreak of yellow fever that hit the colonies. To this day, it's the worst spread of yellow fever to happen in the United States. No one knew where it was coming from or how to stop it. There was a mass exit of about 20,000 people from the city of Philadelphia. The preachers of the time took to the pulpit to proclaim that this was God's judgment. The Quakers at the time actually believed it was God's response to theatrical plays and petitioned the government to ban theater for fear of God's wrath. That's a big oopsies on our part, right? It's laughable now, but we're separated then by just a few centuries. At the time, that may have made sense. It was a traumatic time, though, where they were seeing people get sick left and right. And here's the thing about trauma. It causes us to respond in ways we don't expect. And even in today's culture, you're seeing that all around us. But it's our storm right now that we are facing. A lot of you know that I'm going through this big phase of having an idea or Christianity of hope. It's a phrase by a theologian, by Jürgen Moltmann. So what does it mean to have a Christianity of hope? It means expecting redemption and holding fast to the truth that God is here. God suffers with us in our storms, but there is redemption still. To quote Frederick Buechner, a Presbyterian minister and writer, who says, "Resurrection means the worst thing is never the last thing." Back in 2011, my father was having a hard time landing a secure trucking job where he could be home every day. He had walked away from the company he was working for because they were having him break the law to transport loads at a time. So at the time, we were attending Denver Friends Church. I had just become serious with my faith. But the thing I needed most was a new pair of shoes. I know this is kind of a shocker, but I have size 14 feet. I don't know if you can tell by the height. But one day after church, someone came up to me and asked me what my shoe size was. And when I said it, he said, "You're not going to believe this, but I have a whole bag of those size 14 shoes. Do you want them?" So when you're a storm like the storm my family is going through, and you're not sure where God is, it's those little moments that give you hope. In Luke 8:22-25, we read about another storm. It's a storm where the disciples are in the sea, but Jesus is asleep while it's happening. In verses 24-25, it says, "The disciples went and woke him, saying, 'Master, Master, we're going to drown.' And he got up and rebuked the wind and the raging waters, and the storm subsided, and all was calm. And then he turns around and says, 'Where is your faith?'" So I preached a message on this passage some time ago, and I think it shows Jesus having this weird sense of humor. It's very dry and very Jewish, and something that could probably be taken from an episode of Seinfeld. The message is the same here as in Acts, that we have to have faith that God is with us still, even if he appears that he's asleep. I know for some of you it's a sin to even mention Christmas right now, but you're going to have to bear with me in my heresy. In 1861, there was a poet named Henry Wadsworth Longfellow who experienced the loss of his wife of 18 years. She burned in a horrific fire. In 1863, his son went off to fight in the Civil War for the Union. Henry did not want his son to join, but his son had made up his mind. His son was severely wounded in November of that year. And as Henry was sitting next to his son one day, he heard bells in the distance. And he reflected on the horrors and casualties of the war. And here lay his son, fighting for his life. The church bells reminded Henry of the promises and hopes of peace in this world. His Christian faith had always comforted him during these times. But how can someone be comforted like that after experiencing the death of a spouse and the potential death of his own son? Henry reflected on the irony of those church bells ringing during a time that the country was at war with itself. So he became cynical in his heart and wrote down, "Hate is strong," and mocks the song of peace on earth and goodwill to men. However, the more Henry reflected, the more he came back to this mysterious and inviting figure of Jesus. He reflected on the Nativity and how God came as his peaceful presence into a world in the midst of chaos. He wrestled with God and came to this conclusion by also writing these words: "God is not dead, nor doth he sleep." If these words sound familiar, it is because these words are adapted and put to music which became the hymn, I Heard the Bells on Christmas Day. I think those bells are still ringing today. Storms come and go in life, and it's a normal part of being on this planet. But we have an assurance that we will get to the other side of it. Whether or not it's like Paul riding on the wreckage to the shore, or if it's Jesus calming down the storm immediately, we can know that we will get to the other side. Our response should be less about making sense of the storm, and more about seeing God in it and realize that He's still walking with us, even when we don't understand it. The thing about God is that we will never know the full truth on this side of eternity. We have to learn to rest in mystery. So all we can really do is that trust that He loves us and that He hasn't given up on us. And when we're on the other side of this, let us remember it as a time, perhaps, where there was hope and love on our part. Let's courageously hold on to a Christianity of hope during a time that is uncertain. Let's believe that God is still at work in the world, that there's nothing we can do to change that. I talked about John Wesley a bit at the beginning of this sermon, so I think it's appropriate that I end with his final words. The final sentence sums up his entire belief system. He said, "The best of all, God is with us." So let's hold on to that Christianity of hope. And let's always remember God is never far away. Let's go ahead and sing in our hearts How Deep the Father's Love for Us, hymn lyrics on the back. But after this, we're going to go into a practice called open worship, where we meditate and talk with God. And if a word is laid on our hearts, we can feel free to speak. So let's go ahead and close in prayer. Dear Lord, we thank you that you're present in the storms. So Lord, let us hold on to that Christianity of hope. And always be reminded of your presence near to us. And Lord, as we go into open worship after the song, let's remember who you are. That you're someone who doesn't abandon us. Lord, we're thankful for the way you continue walking with us, even during these times. In Jesus' name, amen.